Sit your ass down and
Sit your ass down. Sit your $5 ass down before I make 10.
Man, sit your ass down.
Yes! Here we go. Another edition of this week's Sit Your Ass Down. Man, we had some doozies. Like, I kind of alluded to it before my man Jamie called. I talked about Drew Brees, but believe it or not, Drew Brees was not the Sit Your Ass Down this week because he took the time to learn and grow before we turned on the mic. But this first ballot the first ballot of this week, Sit Your Ass Down, go to another NFL coach, Vic Fangio, coach of the Denver Broncos. Because in the height of the George Floyd thing, I talked about the Amy Cooper thing, you got your Audrey Elbro. It's a lot of things that are racially charged in our nation right now, in the backdrop of a pandemic. But oh no, Vic Fangio, here's why he's getting Sit Your Ass Down. Vic Fangio saw the world essentially crumbling around him, and they asked about what's your thoughts on protesting, what's your thoughts on just the current state that we're in. Hey, we're glad football's coming back. What do you think is going to be? What do you think is going to happen? And with a straight face, Vic Fangio looked in the middle of the camera and says, quote, "I don't see racism at all in the NFL. I don't see discrimination in the NFL at all." Vic, man, okay. There's so many instances of racism or discrimination. Let's go racism. Racism, the first thing we can talk about is called the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule was made by Art Rooney for this reason, if for nothing else. Now, over the years, there have been modifications to it, and if you want to go back, and you could go back to a Sit Your Ass Down from a couple weeks ago where we talked about one of those modifications of the Rooney Rule that didn't come to pass, thank God. But the Rooney Rule is basically like this: if there's a head coaching job available, which is interesting because Vic, you are a head coach, so you may have something to do with this. You should be aware of this. The Rooney Rule says this: hey, look, if a head coaching position becomes available on any team, it doesn't even have to be a head coach, any coaching position that becomes open on any team, you have to interview a person of color before you can close interviews and make your decision. Now, the fact that you even have to make that rules lets me know that there was a bunch of people of color who were looked over based on the fact that they were people of color and not necessarily their attributes. So that covers racism. So there's that. There's a definite rule, the rule that you abide by because you are a head coach in the NFL. You don't see discrimination in the NFL. You sure about that? Discrimination. Let me tell you something about the NFL, and I love football. The best of the best of the best of the athletes that they have. Meaning, you have to discriminate those who are not the best. And let's talk about discrimination. Let's take the other side of the coin. What was the last great white running back that you've seen? It's Christian McCaffrey, and then crickets. Maybe Danny Woodhead, and that was like 2006? It's a huge drop off. When the last great white running back? Now, don't get it twisted. All my Rex Burkhead fans out there, look, I'm not knocking Rex Burkhead, but if I'm going to call him an elite, great running back, no. He's a white guy whose job is running back. That doesn't necessarily make you great. So that just shows the discrimination right there. Just on a professional level. On a personal level, Colin Kaepernick. Do I have to jump into this anymore? So Vic, man, I get what you're doing with the Broncos, but for right now, a hell of a draft. Hell of a draft. You drafted all the weapons to make your quarterback staff look like supermen. But for right now, when it comes down to these matters, Vic, man, sit your ass down. This one's going to be a quick one because I don't even think I should even be talking about this. But a sit your ass down goes to the good folks at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Yes, that newspaper published a headline article, headline news, that read in the wake of protestings, in the wake of civil unrest. It says, hey, buildings matter too. End quote. That was the headline. Buildings matter too. And Philadelphia Inquirer. Guys, Black Lives Matter is just not a cool catchphrase. It's actually a cry. It's a help. And I'm pretty sure, like I talk about how Drew Brees had to listen, I think y'all need to listen. Y'all need to listen so much that the crazy thing is, the day that headline went out, whoever gave the thumbs up on there, so I blame the editors of that headline, a lot of the reporters, if not most of them reporters, called in sick the next day. No work got done because that headline was so tasteless, so just tone deaf, that there are people, good folks, people of color, and people who, you know, white people who work at the Philadelphia Inquirer is like, dog, what are you doing? What are you doing? You just made the spot super hot for me. So, Philadelphia Inquirer, the entire paper, man, sit your ass down. And lastly, certainly not leastly, this one is just, talk about tone deaf, goes to Kimberly and Beck. Now, those who don't know, Kimberly and Beck is a radio show out of Rochester, New York, radio show. So the same thing that happened in the Philadelphia Inquirer, where people were talking about civil unrest and the riots and the everything. You know what? Before I even jump into this, because I know there's a couple of eye rolls and there's a couple people who listen to me and they say like, all right, you putting 100 on 10. We have the actual audio from the broadcast of Kim and Beck, so let's just play the audio right here.
You can hear it. Fourth man also confirmed it. You know, she called him the N-word. That's when they really went after her.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Were they acting N-wordish? There's your question.
They were acting thuggerly, like, I think. They're
Were they
thugs.
acting N-wordly?
Yeah. And by the way,
You can't say that. What are you doing?
No, were they acting that way?
No, you can't say that.
hey, if that would have
Also,
been...
stop
I
saying
didn't
thugs.
say-
That's part of the problem. You
No,
can't-
it's not. They're thugs.
No, Peter
They're
was a 2x4.
thugs. If you look like a thug and if you act like a thug and you got 3-on-1 and beating up a
And-
white woman with a 2x4, by God, you're a thug.
And by the way, there are people in the black community would say they are acting N-wordly.
But they can say that. You can't say that.
It's double standard. I was going to say
It
if
doesn't
that had
matter.
And I don't appreciate the double standard.
well, it doesn't. Who cares?
If she had been a black woman, the N-word wouldn't have been that big a deal. They'd have walked away. But a white woman calling
You don't.
3 black
You can't
guys
say
the
it.
N-word,
Can't say
bam,
it. Can't
we're
say it.
going
But
back.
they were acting that way.
But you don't understand the meaning of
No,
that.
we
I
understand.
I
No, you
understand
don't.
the meaning very well.
Telling you.
I understand the meaning very well.
I'm going to apologize to anybody offended by that right now. I'm just
No
telling you
one's
right now.
offended.
I'm going to apologize for that.
Well, apparently people were offended. Because since they were offended, Kimberly and Beck got fired that day. Now, one thing out of the thing we talked about earlier, just listen. Where it's like, I know everything. No, you don't know the black experience. And I've never fought Kimberly, who just wanted to say the N-word so tough. N-wordedly? Man, get the fuck out of here. N-wordedly? Never mind. Let's stay on topic. Like, this whole thing that teach me that there's a lot that needs to be going on. And yes, iHeartRadio fired them promptly after that display of whatever that was that you just heard. And now they have time. The only thing I hope that didn't happen was what I imagine was their producer in the back. You know, their, for lack of a better term, DJ M80 in the back, just saying you can't say that or you can't do this, because he knows the rules. He knows what's up, and he probably saw this thing happening. He probably saw it. He need to feed his family. But for right now, I guess with an assist from the good folks at iHeartMedia, Kimberly and Beck, sorry. Nah, I don't know you like that to call you Kim. Kimberly and Beck, out of a radio show in Rochester, New York. Miss, sit your ass down. So that's pretty much